There is a moment that comes for almost everyone who stays in this profession long enough. It doesn't arrive with drama. There's no blow-up, no single incident you can point to and say, that was it. It's quieter. It's a pause, usually late at night, or on a long drive home, or after a meeting that didn't go the way you hoped. And you find yourself asking a question you never expected to ask when you first chose this path. Is this still worth it? Not because you don't believe in public service, not because you've lost your values, and not because you're incapable of doing the job, but because the job asks more of you than it used to. More patience, more restraint, more emotional control, more tolerance for criticism that isn't always fair, informed, or well-intentioned. That question, is it still worth it, is not a failure of commitment. It's a sign you're paying attention. Today, I want to answer that question honestly. Let's dive in. Welcome to Gov360, your full circle view on local government leadership. Since we launched Gov360, we've covered a broad array of topics, but many of them have focused on the challenges facing the profession, on the struggles that local government professionals are facing every day. Recently, someone asked me, given how challenging everything has become and how toxic the environment can be with keyboard warriors and social media and the breakdown of civility in public discourse, is it still worth it? Would you still recommend to young professionals coming up that they enter public service or that they aspire to city management? I want to address that today. I didn't come to city management on a traditional path. I got my start in public life young, elected to city council at 23, serving as mayor at 26. What hooked me wasn't power or politics. It was something much simpler. I remember voting to approve a park project early in my elected career. Months later, I drove past it after it opened. Kids were on the playground, families were gathered, people were using something that hadn't existed before. It was intoxicating, and I got hooked on local government. There was no headline, no applause. The average resident had no idea who voted for it, but it mattered. That moment never left me. Later, I spent years in the private sector, public affairs, land use, real estate. The work was fast. The wins were clear. The compensation was very good. But something was missing. The impact felt abstract. I was helping deals move, clients succeed, projects get approved. But I wasn't shaping communities in the same way. I wasn't stewarding anything that felt lasting. That realization, a drive to find meaning, is what pulled me back into local government, and I fell in love with public service all over again. Before I go any further, let me take just a moment for some quick housekeeping. Gov360 has been fortunate to consistently rank in the top 25% of all podcasts on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and the conversation around the show has grown well beyond what I originally expected when it launched. One thing we're especially focused on right now is growing the video side of Gov360. If you're watching on YouTube, taking just a second to share the episode really does help more local government professionals find this content. And if you're not already subscribed to the Gov360 newsletter on LinkedIn, I'd encourage you to do that as well. It's free, and LinkedIn is where we can connect and continue these conversations. All right, let's get back to the conversation at hand. Loving this work, unfortunately, doesn't insulate you from its hardest moments. Early in my career, I inherited a city facing staggering structural budget deficits. They had been spending significantly more than they were bringing in. At the current pace, the math was unforgiving. The options were limited. The pressure was real, and the stakes were existential. That experience taught me something fundamental. Leadership in local government is rarely about choosing between good and bad. It's about choosing between hard and harder. We made difficult decisions. We got creative. We took risks that were uncomfortable but necessary. And we turned the corner. That kind of work is exhausting, but it's also deeply satisfying. Still, those wins don't protect you forever. Later in my career, I went through something that fundamentally reshaped how I understand this profession. Not a mistake, not a failure of competence, not a lapse in ethics, a moment when the environment itself became untenable. For 2 years, I led a city where an organized, well-funded, and vicious opposition decided that change itself was the enemy. Long before I ever made a decision, long before I had the chance to earn trust or prove intent, I became a symbol in someone else's political war. What followed wasn't disagreement. It wasn't policy debate. It wasn't even criticism. It was a sustained campaign of disinformation, personal attacks, and pressure, aimed not at changing outcomes, but at forcing removal. And here's the part that matters for this conversation. As difficult as those days and months were, I didn't lose confidence in public service. I didn't lose faith in professional management, and I didn't stop believing in the value of this work. What I lost were illusions that competence alone protects you, that neutrality guarantees safety, that doing everything right ensures stability. That experience was painful. It affected my family. It tested my resolve. And yes, it eventually led to my departure from that city. But it also clarified something essential. This profession does not promise comfort. It does not promise permanence. And it does not promise fairness in every chapter. What it promises, if you're willing to accept it, is meaning. That chapter didn't make the work less worth doing. It made it more honest. Because when you've been through something like that, you stop chasing validation. You stop equating longevity with success. And you start measuring your career by something much more durable. Did I lead with integrity? Did I protect my people? Did I leave the institution stronger than I found it? Did I stay true to myself, even when it would have been easier not to? When I answer those questions honestly, the answer is still yes. And that's why I can say this with clarity, not bravado. Even after the hardest chapters, this profession is still worth it. I'm sharing that not to relive it, but because it reframed how I think about this profession. For a while, it's tempting to interpret moments like that as evidence that the job isn't worth it, that politics overwhelms the profession, that integrity isn't enough, that the personal cost is just too high. But with distance and reflection, I see it differently. That experience didn't make the profession less meaningful. It clarified it. It stripped away illusions about protection, about permanence, about control, and replaced them with clarity. This job doesn't promise safety. It promises significance. Here's what keeps coming up when I reflect on my own journey and when I listen to others who spent decades in this work. The job is still worth it because you see the impact. You shape institutions. You build capacity in people. You leave places stronger than you found them. I've watched department heads grow into leaders because they were trusted early. I've seen organizations stabilize. I've seen communities weather storms, financial, political, emotional, because someone stayed steady when it mattered. Those things don't show up on LinkedIn. They don't go viral. They don't earn applause, but they matter. But let's be clear. This profession has a cost. It can be lonely. It can be thankless. It can blur the line between professional criticism and personal attack. I've spoken with seasoned executives who left mid-career, not because they failed, but because they were exhausted by constant hostility and diminishing trust. I've seen people transition to the private sector and rediscover balance, autonomy, and peace. Those choices are valid. Staying is not a moral obligation. It's a professional choice. But staying intentionally with boundaries, perspective, and clarity can still be deeply rewarding. As I see it, this is what the profession needs now. Local government does not need martyrs. It needs grounded leaders, leaders who communicate clearly, leaders who protect their inner circle, leaders who understand that professionalism is the floor, not the shield, leaders who are willing to lead boldly, even knowing it may cost them. and leaders who know when to pause, recalibrate, and reconnect with purpose. So is city management still worth it? Yes. Not because it's easy, not because it's safe, not because it guarantees appreciation, but because it still offers something rare, the opportunity to matter, quietly, responsibly, and meaningfully, to shape the places where people live their lives, to steward institutions bigger than yourself, to leave a record of service that outlasts any single role. That work is demanding, but it is still worth it. So when people ask whether city management is still worth it, I don't answer casually. I answer deliberately. Because this profession doesn't reward comfort. It rewards courage. It doesn't promise certainty. It demands judgment. And it doesn't protect you from hard chapters, but it gives you the opportunity to lead with integrity inside them. Choosing to stay in this work, or to return to it, isn't about clinging to a title. It's about choosing meaning over ease, service over applause, stewardship over ego. That's what it means to govern boldly. Not recklessly, not loudly, but intentionally. And when you make that choice with clear eyes and grounded purpose, yes, this profession is still worth it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this work. Until next time, govern boldly, my friends.